My name is Luke Spencer, and I am the Libertarian Party candidate running for United States Congress against Sheila Jackson Lee right here in Houston. I'm a native Houstonian. I studied economics at Texas State University, and like so many people in Houston, I'm proud to say that I work in the oil and gas industry. I lived in the Heights for a long time, but Midtown's my neighborhood now. Immigration is a very important topic. It's perhaps one of the most pressing issues that this country is facing today. I think it's a topic that does not lend itself very well to sound bites. I think that it needs to be discussed at length so that we can step back from a few of these little hot button topics and see the big picture. People have been coming to what is now the United States from all over the world for hundreds of years, and we are in fact a nation of immigrants. I think that politicians, Republican Party politicians, Democratic Party politicians, have been using this this issue in a way that benefits them at the expense of the American voters and immigrants who would like to come here. So let's unpack that a little bit. The Republicans, on the one hand, they have in their primary nativist voters who would prefer to have much lower rates of immigration or no immigration at all. And they have to please that group if they want to move on to the general election. All of them do. On the other hand, you have big businesses who finance the Republican Party. And those big businesses, they want large quantities of cheap labor. They want immigration. So the Republican Party is having to talk out of both sides of its mouth on that issue, which is exactly what the Democratic Party is doing. On the one hand, you have labor unions who in large part finance the Democratic Party, who want to reduce immigration so that they can command higher wages in industry. At the same time, they have to talk out of the other side of their mouth to a very different constituent group, which is people of color who vote for them in large quantities, or at least larger quantities than they do for Republicans. So this cognitive dissonance and the legislation that results from it is a result of bad policy that's not for our benefit. It's for the politicians' benefit. The most common Libertarian Party position on immigration is something that's called open borders. That's been what most libertarians have supported for a very long time. And recently, we've seen that those on the far left have started to adopt this policy position. What open borders means is that, like now, there are ports of entry, airports, border crossings, things like that. And anyone wishing to enter the United States would have to go through those ports. And they would have to demonstrate with documents or a passport who they are. And the government would then be able to vet that person to make sure that they're not a violent criminal or something like that. Now, this sounds good, and I wish it was possible, but I think this is impractical and rather naive for a number of reasons that I'll get into in a second. I'm opposed to open borders. I think that open borders are a bad idea for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's pretty clear that there's a natural upward limit to the rate at which any country can absorb new entrants due to housing, schools, things like that. But more importantly, I think that it's very, very important for a free society to be careful about who it lets in. The world outside of the United States, much of it, is a very unfree place. And the citizens of the United States who own this country have a right and a responsibility to be discerning about who gets in if we want to maintain our freedom here. Imagine, if you will, what would happen to this country if, over the next few decades, tens of millions of Nazis, Marxists, Islamists moved to this country. It would not be sustainable. They would change this country in a way that the citizens of the United States do not consent to. I think it's important to frame this discussion properly before moving on. Most of what people talk about when they talk about immigration is rather backward-looking. It's talking about ways to fix problems that were created by 50 years of failed Republican and Democrat immigration policy. So rather than talking about Band-Aids, what I'd like to do is to talk about what an effective and desirable immigration system would look like, one that I think we can all agree on. And then once we've done that, then and only then talk about how do we get there from here. I think that our future immigration system needs to be based on certain core principles that we can all agree upon. Firstly, we need to agree that the United States is a sovereign nation, that our citizens own it, and that we can decide who enters and who doesn't. Secondly, I think we can all agree that immigration is beneficial and desirable, but that there are some costs that we need to be mindful of. Third, I think that we can agree this country can accommodate large numbers of people, many more than are even coming right now, but that there is an upward limit. And finally, I think that immigration needs to happen in an orderly fashion, and that immigrants need to be treated humanely. My immigration plan, we need to bring back a guest worker program. We used to have one. We haven't had one since 1965, when labor unions, working with the Democratic Party, got rid of it to inflate their wages. Not everyone who comes to the United States wants to be an American. There are plenty of people who simply want to come here. They want to work for a few months or years, save up some money, and then return home. And we need to have the legal framework to facilitate that. Another thing that I think is important is that for citizenship path immigration, we need to have a cap on that, an actual number, so that people who are a little worried that things are going to get out of hand in their mind, that too many people are going to be coming here, this is going to assuage their concerns about that. I think that 1% per year, 1% of the population, as per the last census, would be a really great way to do that. It's automatically going to go up as the population grows, so it's indexed to something. Right now, there's, well, I should say, in the 2010 census, there were about 310 million Americans. So 1% of that is 3.1 million people, which is a lot more than the 1.5 million people, both documented and undocumented, that were coming here before the Trump election. In 2016, I think it was about 1.5 million. So we would be doubling the number of legal citizenship path immigrants that come here under my plan. I think it's important, and this is kind of a touchy subject, that we don't allow non-citizens to be eligible for any and all welfare programs. People that come to this country, they come here because they want to work hard, They want to improve themselves, their condition, their family. And I think that having welfare available for them as soon as they arrive can be very harmful. They can become reliant on it, addicted to it, and it can really damage them and their families. I also think that not having immigrants eligible for welfare programs will allow people who are maybe iffy about large number of immigrants coming here. It's going to make it a lot easier for them to vote to move forward with a plan such as this. And finally, I think it's important that everyone that comes here is comfortable getting on board with our society, which is based, as I see it, on 3 pillars, right? We are a secular market democracy. If you can't agree to live in such a society, then we don't want them here and we shouldn't allow them. My immigration plan would be enforced at the border, at border crossings and international airline terminals, much like we have now. We do not need a wall. I would also add that the internal border checkpoints that we have set up right now, those need to go away. This is not Soviet Russia. This is not Nazi Germany. This is the United States of America. And when people are driving down the road, it is unacceptable for them to be stopped and asked for their papers. So how do we implement my immigration plan? We start with legislation creating a guest worker program. I think that that's something most Americans can get behind. The next part is a little bit more difficult. We would pass legislation getting rid of all of our current immigration laws. We're going to throw the whole thing out, and it would replace it with something like my plan. Now, there's still one very important question that we have to address, and that's the 11, maybe 12 million undocumented immigrants that are living in the United States today. And that is the beauty of my plan. 3.1 million people, or 1% of the population, would be allowed to apply for citizenship path immigration under my plan. And these 12 million people would be able to apply for that program without going back to their home country. They can apply for that program while they're still living here. 3.1 million a year, in 4 years, it's all taken care of.